This is Patrick from WSOU 89.5 FM, the loudest rock, and I'm here with Tim Charles from Ne Obliviscaris. How you doing?
Very good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for doing this. Super excited to talk to you. So March 24th is when your latest album, Exul, is out. So two singles have been released, Equus and Grawl. And yeah, I don't even know where to begin. There's so much going on in each of these songs. Equus is over 12 minutes long. When did the songwriting for these songs begin? I know this album is a while in the making, but these two songs, when did they begin?
Yeah, I guess the beginnings of songwriting for this album started in May 2019. We were in Australia for an Australian tour, and we kind of spent a week just kind of coming up with some initial ideas. The ones for these original songs, I mean, some of them were even earlier than that. I know that, Martino had the first couple of riffs for Graal because he wrote a bunch of the riffs in that one. In 2019, in the first half of the year, and then Equus was one of those ones where it was actually a different song. So we were writing a different song, but we were at about the 4-minute mark, and the song wasn't working, and we're trying to work out what to do, and we kept changing it and we kept adjusting it and whatever. And then it was probably maybe about September 2019, I went over to Matt's house, and we just tore this original song apart, and we just threw everything from the 4-minute mark in the bin. And we wrote the last like 8.5 minutes that you hear. Him and I wrote most of that in like the basis of it, the riffs and the drum ideas for it in the one night. And then all the strings and everything got written in a few days. And that was all kind of September 2019. But, that wasn't finished with the recording until like early 2022, because it was just, we kept obviously running into so many issues with the pandemic. And it was one of those weird things where, writing started, we were supposed to write, record, go back on tour all in a 12-month period. And then, here we are, that's like 3.5 years ago now, finally getting onto that release tour part of it. So it's been a long, long process, but we're super excited, super proud of how it came out in the long run.
Yeah, definitely. And I know in the past your albums have had songs set up in multiple parts, like Libera parts 1 and 2, Earn parts 1 and 2, songs like that. Can we expect a lot of storytelling on this album?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like the way I approach writing is always trying to create an album that just flows start to finish, and it's not necessarily as a set concept, but it is always trying to make sure things make sense next to each other. When I always used to kind of not enjoy personally as much, a band would have an intro to a record that would be a really cool intro, but it wouldn't actually flow into the next song at all. It would feel like all of a sudden you've changed direction in a completely different thing. And just having all of the songs make sense next to each other. And then the inevitable thing for me, having that in mind, is that then some of the songs are so intertwined that they do just flow and it becomes like part of the same song. So on this album, we have, Misericord 1 and 2. And like other tracks in the past, that basically happened where we had a song that we kind of thought was finished. It was like, 7.5 minutes, which was, is Misericord 1. And I had an idea for a little piano part that came after that. And I was just kind of, every time that song finished with the demo, I was just kind of sitting on the piano singing. And that kind of how that beginning of part 2 started for that. And then it just kept going, for 9 minutes to bring in that, almost 17-minute behemoth that we have for that song. And really that's the same way that a lot of our songs have ended up like that. The storytelling element of it is then really Zen's role, because the music is the thing that is generally written first, and then Zen will listen to the music as a pretty finished product and go, what lyrically does this inspire in himself? And then he'll come up with lyrical themes, and he'll kind of listen to what we have, maybe when we're 2/3 of the way through writing the record, and say, okay, this is the vibe of the record. And then how do I put that together in kind of specific themes and stuff like that from there?
Yeah, it sounds amazing. And going back to the songwriting process, as a band that has a lot of songs that cross like the double-digit minute mark, how do you know when it's done for when you're writing a song? Because I know you said, "Oh, I wanted to add this part, I wanted to add that part." But when you're writing a song that's 17 minutes long, when do you feel like it's done? How do you know?
Yeah, good question. I think that for me, I'm always looking for every song to take the listener on a journey. That's what I enjoy about writing music for Ne Obliviscaris, as opposed to, um, which is a different approach to a lot of bands, because a lot of bands, they might take their listener on a journey across the record. Whereas we're kind of making sure that every song in itself is its own journey, its own entity, and then hopefully they flow as a record also. So I think that especially when we have something that, like a perfect example, like with Misericord 1, the song is pretty, riff, riff, riff. It's a lot of changes, a lot of movement, a lot of ideas in 7.5 minutes. Um, and so when it got to that 7.5 minute part, the idea I had was to then bring it back to something that was then a lot more repetitive, a lot more slow build up, and a completely different change of pace. And then to build it up from there. And then what happened from that point is just to see that out. So when I was kind of putting that together, the original ideas for that, I came to the guys with that original chord progression. We actually were in Australia at the time. We had a bit of a jam on that. We recorded the jam session, and I went back home and I kind of edited like the bits of that jam session that seemed to work the best, and then kind of wrote extra stuff on top and sent it back to the guys as kind of a first draft idea. And from there, it's just kind of pushing until it feels right. And then what feels right is really then just a totally ambiguous, subjective thing. But it is just seeing through the idea and getting to that point where with that, it was a clear idea of scaling it way, way back and building it up again. And then whatever ideas come up, but going, okay, I'm just building up. Okay, that means that it has to hit a 10 out of 10 intensity wise at some point in order to have the payoff. And then once you hit that, you can kind of finish it whenever feels like the right moment. But that part two for that particular example, it doesn't really hit that full peak until the last minute and a half with the last riff. So it really is like 8 minutes of very, very slowly building and changing to get to that peak. And then that's it. And that's the finish. And at that point, it was like, okay, it's 16.5 minutes. I guess that's enough. Having said that, I actually did write another song, which I thought of as a part 3 that flowed on, but we didn't finish it like in time. We have kind of half a song. And so if something just keeps flowing, you can kind of keep going with that. I don't know. I feel like maybe we'll eventually do a concept record just because of that tendency that I have of trying to make everything flow into each other. But it is really just making sure that we love it. And if we love it, it's done. And for us, if we don't love a song, we actually never finish it. So that's why we don't really have many B-sides to show people, because our songs take a long time to write. It's not that quick to write a 17-minute song. And if you're kind of halfway through it and you're not feeling it, well, you just throw it in the bin, and maybe you then pick the best riffs and put them in a different song later on. But it's just, if we're really excited, if we really love it, that's, I guess, the ultimate sign that, yeah, okay, it's done. We love it. That's good enough. We'll move it along now.
Yeah, I totally get that. And a song I do have to ask about is Grawl, that I'm very curious about, because there's an instrumental part in the middle where Matt and Benjamin are soloing on guitar and you're playing violin over it. And, when I'm thinking 2 lead guitar players plus a violin player, that sounds overwhelming, but, it all ties together so well in this song. How do you work with Matt and Benjamin to make parts that also work on guitar, but also fit a violin in there as well without it being overkill?
Yeah, great question. I think that trial and error is the reality. I mean, we've been doing this for a really long time. I know this is only our 4th album, but the band actually started, this almost 20 years ago is when the band first started. Even though it took us like 9 years to get to our first album, our first decade was we didn't get very far. But So a lot of trial and error, but essentially when the songs are being written, I'm always listening for what guitar riffs have the potential for melodies over the top. And then if it works for a melody to be added over the top, it's like, well, do we want it to be a guitar lead, a violin part, a clean vocal? Those are kind of probably the most common options we have. If it's a really cool melodic, like if it's a kind of melodic thrash guitar riff, often it doesn't work to put something melodic over the top. So that's then better for, say, Zen to be singing, or if I'm playing violin, it's maybe a rhythmic part that's not a prominent melody, it's more a backing part. Whereas if it's especially something that is more chordal based, it's something where the type of riff supports something over the top, like in the bit that you're referring to, in Graal, there's a bit about, I guess it's maybe 4.5 minutes into the track where, the guitars are playing kind of an arpeggiated, picked out part. And, the way that's kind of designed is, the guitars are kind of picking out this arpeggiated part, off to the left and the right. And I wrote like a violin lead. And then on this side then of the mix, there's a viola lead, and they kind of intersperse between it. So I'm actually doing violin and viola at the same time there. And then it, changes across to then the next bit, Zen comes in. And so it's really just feeling what feels right, and then noticing as we're writing the balance. So Zen and I work together a lot. We don't write our parts without consultation. We go, hey, where are your ideas? Hey, this is the parts where my ideas are. We coordinate. Okay, well, if you're doing that there, then maybe I'll do this here, and we go back to you. So Zen and I in particular work really closely together to work out which bits. And then I'm always thinking, this bit would use a melody. Is it clean vocal? Is it violin? And then sometimes I swap. Like sometimes, like I think in Graal, originally the bits where I sing early in the song, my original ideas were violin ideas, and I wasn't really happy with them. And then it ended up flipping, and they end up becoming clean vocal parts, and then other parts became violin bits instead. So it's definitely a trial and error process, but the coordination and communication within the band is really the key element to making that a success.
And I'm kind of curious, do you and Matt and Benjamin ever try to outdo one another? Does it ever get kind of competitive with like three lead musicians in the band?
Not really. I mean, like Matt sticks to the rhythms mostly. So, he's happy if there's cool riffs to play.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, likewise with Benji, I mean, he, I think because there's so much going on, I guess it is just really communicating what we have great ideas for. But I'll give you one example with that same song where the ending riff for Graal, which is this, epic, super heavy 7/4 riff that goes on for about 3 minutes. And it's actually a variation of this kind of thrashy riff from earlier in the song, about, I don't know, maybe 1.5, 2 minute mark. There's the same riff, but in kind of a thrash version. And then we change it to this real super heavy, more, epic version. And Martino sent through this variation because the song wasn't really working, because we just had the first half and we didn't know what to do with it. And when he sent through this idea for, hey, let's bring that riff back. And I'm like, yes, this is so cool. And instantly I had all of these violin ideas, vocal ideas, all this sort of stuff. And the section wasn't that long. It only went for maybe 1.5 minutes. And then within, I don't know, maybe within 2 days, Benji sent through the guitar ideas that end up on the album, like pretty much that final version. And he used up like the whole riff pretty much to the end. And I'm like, damn it. Like, I had so many cool ideas. But then what we did is I'm like, no, hold on. Okay, yeah. No, we'll just make it go longer. And that's what we experimented with. So that is sometimes a solution if the ideas are good enough and if they work next to each other and they're different enough. So with Graal, the original demo, that last riff was probably half as long. And then it was like, okay, cool, there's the Benji sweeping. And then Benji goes to the kind of long, like lead notes. And then we bring in the string section. And then we bring in the violin solo, and then the viola comes in, like the viola section comes in halfway through the violin. So it's kind of this ever-changing development through that section. And but that's pretty rare that we both have ideas for the same bit. Often that's not the case. But also sometimes when Benji writes something, he'll kind of already have an idea of, hey, this bit I want to do a solo, and he might even send it through with a demo of a solo in one bit. But the guys are always conscious of that there's 7 instruments in the band amongst 6 of us, like me playing 2. And so, Benji never sends through something with the whole song filled with guitar solos. He'll try to pick, maybe a moment in each song, knowing that, Zen and I need stuff to do as well.
Yeah, definitely. And you do violin as well as clean vocals in the band. I'm curious what it's like playing a long, complex song like this live when you have to worry about nailing your violin solos as well as your vocals.
Yeah, so I guess it's the other way around of that I have to worry about nailing the vocals whilst also jumping around the stage like crazy playing the violin. Because, I'll be like running around the stage playing violin and whatever. And then I got to sing and, I got to make sure I'm not out of breath. I got to make sure I can be in control of my breathing and my body. And that was, I guess, the challenge that I had to learn. Once again, just through experience and experimentation on the live process. So I mean, it's challenging, but at the same time, we've done, hundreds of shows now over the years, although we haven't done any shows for a while, with the pandemic. And that's the thing that right now we're talking about, like, oh crap, like we haven't done a show in a while, and it's all good and well to know your parts, but it's getting used to, hey, I've got to get used to that when I get to this part in this song, it might be the 85-minute mark of the show, and I might be exhausted and I have to sing this high note. How do I do that? And practicing that and practicing, um, getting fit enough to be able to do that, because like that's an important part as a singer. And like I was even like legitimately, talking the other day about, oh, I think I'm gonna have to start doing things like, I got 2-story house. I might have to start maybe doing like stair runs, like while practicing, like maybe sing my vocal part and then run up and down the stairs while the guitars are playing. And then with my next vocal entry, then go to the mic, and practice my part, just to kind of mimic a bit the reality of what a live show is like, being a bit puffed, engaging with the crowd, getting carried away, and still having to be able to perform really well, because we haven't done that in a while. And it will be a fun challenge to get back to that.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely looking forward to it. You guys are playing Gramercy Theater in New York this November. So definitely try to make it out to that. Exul out March 24th. Tim, is there anything else you want to add?
Just thank you so much to everyone for the amazing support so far, for the singles we've released and the new stuff. It had been over 5 years since we released anything new. And when you disappear for that long, I mean, obviously a lot of bands had a bit of a break with the pandemic, but you never quite know what the response is going to be. So it's been really heartening just to have such a fantastic response, and just see so much excitement about the tours. And we're super looking forward to get back to the Gramercy and playing in the US. It's definitely one of our favorite places to play, and crowds are always crazy, which is a lot of fun for us. And so it'll be an exciting time, and just a really exciting year for the band.
All right, definitely looking forward to it. Tim, thank you. This is Patrick, WSOU 89.5.
Thank you.